Commissioner Juanita Vero is joining me here today. I'm Commissioner Dave Strohmeyer. Missoula County Commissioner Josh Slotnick is not able to join us today, and already we have a hand up. Jenny Dixon.
That was my mistake. I apologize.
Okay. That was an accidental raising of the hand. So anyway, without further ado, let's get rolling here. Welcome to the December 15th version of the Missoula County Heritage Roundtable. This is something that we've done a few times here. Originally, I conceived of pulling this group together. It's been a few years ago now when we met in person at the top of the First Interstate Bank building for, I think that was maybe our inaugural meeting. But anyway, the idea is that up until that point in time, and even right now, there really is no forum for those with an interest in heritage, historic preservation, historic resources to join together and compare notes. So this is a pretty informal group, but it's not to say that at some point in time if folks so choose, we could not get more formal, but it's mainly an informal forum for us to come together periodically and share what we have been up to, what we're observing in the community, and opportunities for us to collaborate together, recognizing that history really does matter. If there's anything that I think folks on this line should resonate with, is that the only way to, as a society, create a civil society and civic culture is to understand our past and to not only not make the same mistakes that have been made in the past, but be informed by that past to envision what a truly positive and creative future might be. So from that standpoint, for me at least, and I hope many of you on the line here today share the same sentiment, history is not simply an add-on, an amenity, something that we can do without. It strikes at the very heart of who we are as human beings and as Americans and Montanans and Missoulians. So with that, we have a lineup today of a number of presentations and presenters who I think you'll find pretty interesting. But also, we have generous time at the end. We don't need to take up the entire hour and a half that we've scheduled for this meeting, but we have plenty of time at the end of this meeting to do a round robin of folks on the line here and just share what you're, if you're part of a historical society or a museum in the Sealy Swan, or if you're part of some other entity here in Missoula County that you think you have something important to share relative to history and heritage, chime in. We'd love to hear from you. So with that, let me kick things off by introducing our very own Jerry Marks, who has for decades played a key role with the extension here, county extension in Missoula County, and is going to share a little bit about some of the really exciting things that are going on as we speak at the fairgrounds. If you've not been out there recently, take a drive by. There's some significant construction going on at the main gate to the fairgrounds, and Jerry is going to be the one who is going to help inform us what that all amounts to. So Jerry, if you want to introduce yourself to the group, and I will begin to share my screen. Just let me know when to advance the slides.
Okay, will do. Thanks, Dave. Yeah, we can go ahead and put that first one up. Yeah, and I thought we'd do a little update. I guess I'll start off. The fair has been really part of Missoula for a very long time. We going clear back to the 1870s, they started putting together what we would call a fair. It took many years to evolve, and it was located just a little south of the current site. And then in the 1880s, towards the end of the 1880s, they actually moved it out west of Missoula to where the sugar beet plant went in, just off of kind of the area where Reserve is and some of the stores out here. And then it moved to where our current site is in 1913. The site out on west of Missoula was sold, and so the commissioners bought this site out here. It's about 46 acres. and it's gone through a lot of gyrations over the years. Had a couple major fires, but it is very much a thing that really, I think, represents where Missoula is, the people, and what we think is important. On the picture in front of you is a picture, overall picture of the fairgrounds. And what I'll talk the most about is right up here in this northeast corner. It's about 4 acres, and we're putting up a new facility and have about 2.5 acres here of gardens. And we're calling this the Rocky Mountain Gardens and Exploration Center. There's a current process that is going on to put together a new livestock facility. We lost our livestock facilities that are actually over where our current ice rink is, but they're going to put a new rodeo grounds in here. This line right here was the original racetrack, and that's no longer there, but we've kind of left a path there. And there's been a number of changes so far. The commercial building has been updated. The culinary building's been updated, and we have some new food booths over here. So there's been a number of changes, plus some of this area over here has been evolved. And there is a new maintenance facility that's down here on the south side of the fairgrounds, and that is complete and in place. So that's right there. I got a picture of the commercial building out here, as well as what it looks like on the inside. Next picture. And this is architect's rendition of what it's going to look like when it's done. And this is South Avenue here in front, Stevens here on the side. And this will have the offices. The building is made up of actually the Extension Office, the Weed District, the Conservation District, and the Missoula Butterfly House and its sectarian. And the Butterfly House is going to be on the back side of this, and then they'll have an insectarium more in the front. And upstairs, we will have a demo kitchen to help people learn how to freeze and can and dry foods. What else can I say? Next picture. We can get it to move.
Working on it, Jerry.
Yep. And this is an artist's rendition of what it looks from the back. And this is our garden area, which will have some raised beds. In particular, I want programs working with kids, but also handicap. And we will have an outdoor classroom back here. And we will also have a greenhouse to raise stuff for the garden area, as well as to teach people and using the greenhouse. And then this area here is kind of an outdoor classroom, and we will have a major conference room down here on this lower floor. Upstairs will be offices of both Extension, Weed, and the Conservation District. And down on this side, next to the greenhouse, we'll have more of our horticulture stuff. I'm kind of rushing through this, but and anyway, this is a picture of on the butterfly part of what we're trying to do. And this also talks about the main things that we have in the facility. Yeah. More on butterflies. And these are mostly tropical butterflies. The greenhouse itself will be operating at 80 degrees and high humidity. So we know it's going to be popular, but they bring in chrysalics that they hatch out into the butterflies, and they have about 500 butterflies in the butterfly house at all times. So it'll be quite an experience. Next slide. We can get it to go.
Yeah, I'm working on it, Jerry. Apparently, some peanut butter and a key here or something. Stand by.
Well, that's when you have lunch over your computer. Oh yeah, and this is more in the insectary part of their facility. again, often tropical type insects. Here's a millipede. And it's really quite an experience to see the different kinds of insects. This is a spider, tarantula spider. I just think, yeah, it's really important to them have that exposure. This is looking at it more from the garden area. And I'm going to say it's actually a garden area of mini gardens of what we're trying to do, because they're made up of different things. Like I said, some of the raised beds, trying to teach kids as well as adults, but we also got gardens to try to demonstrate new kinds of things, I guess. For example, we'll be showing new kinds of fruits. Like up here is Hascaps, which is a replacement for blueberries. This particular plant doesn't need the acid condition, and we think it's going to have a major fit here for Western Montana. And also, can we grow lawns with without a lot of fertilizer and nutrients, more dryland lawns, which we can. We got that kinds of things demonstrated. What else can I say? And then certainly I've got a forest of different kinds of trees. Really want to give people an impression of what they can do in their own herb garden. And we're also working to bring in some culture. We visited with Rose Bear Don't Walk. She's a Salish ethnobotanist, to give us a garden area that fits their culture, of the kinds of plants that are important. And Missoula is also a sister city to Japan, which also opens the door to a garden area that would fit Japan. So it's going to be many things here on this site. And here's some more examples of what we're trying to do. Pollinators is a very important thing to us. There's been a lot of questions on it. We get a lot of questions, but trying to set up those kind of gardens, using a set of a greenhouse, a lap greenhouse, I guess I'll call it, that you can start plants earlier and grow them later, is another thing that's becoming popular. And just actually growing different kinds of things, which I think this area is going to be a major attraction to Montanans in the surrounding area. Yes. Here's a shot from our demo kitchen, being able to freeze and can different kinds of foods that I know is going to be popular. And this is an example of an outdoor classroom. What we're going to have it, I think we'll use a lot in the summer. And if the weather's decent in the winter, we seem to be getting a longer growing season, so it might be used more than I thought. And I think, is that the last one? Yeah, I think that's the last picture. I guess if I had a thought, we had Tony in Cashola give us a groundbreaking there in May. And some of his words really stuck with me about us connecting with the land. It's plants, it's insects, it's animals, and what we teach each other and what we teach our children. And I think that's really a theme, what we're trying to do with this new facility. So I'll take any quick questions if you got any.
Thanks, Jerry. That's fantastic and exciting work out there. Any questions for Jerry or comments? Anyone?
Just this
yeah.
is,
oh, I'm sorry. Who?
it's Tony in Cashola.
Oh, Tony. Okay, go ahead, Tony.
I just wanted to add that thank you for the kind words, but I don't remember what I said. But
well, I remember some of those words, Tony.
But I'd just like to thank you for that, and also when we work with the tribes, anything that pertains to culture, make sure that we're in the loop.
Yes.
Because I work the way we work here as a tribal department, we are kind of I guess, assigned to the language and culture preservation of the tribes. And I work with a council of traditional elders, and so we discuss a lot of these kinds of projects and different kinds of things that are not here. So if they're off the reservation and with other programs, other agencies. So just keep us in the loop, and then we can offer whatever we can.
Okay, appreciate that. Have you got any other names in addition to Rose that we should include?
I could find out, and then I can let you know.
Yes, we're just now, because the building is going up, so we're starting to really pay a lot more attention to the gardens and expect to spend quite a bit of time this winter and spring getting those gardens planned out. So timing is good.
I'll get right back to you on that.
Okay, appreciate it.
If not, I'll assign Tom Smith to it. He's good at that.
Okay.
Thanks so much, Tony. Lisa, Tate.
I was just curious, Jerry, this is really exciting to see, and I was wondering what your timeline is for opening.
Oh, that is a good question. And let me tell you, we've had a lot of struggles putting this together. It's really been a slow process. But our timeline right now is hopefully we have the building up in March 2023. That's our goal. And we hope to have our garden completed then. Well, we may get some done this following season, but it's really going to be the spring and summer of 2023. So it's getting closer.
It's getting closer. Okay. Other questions or comments for Jerry? All right. Thanks so much, Jerry. This is exciting work. And I think it's a reminder, especially when you're talking about the gardens, that agriculture is part of our heritage here in Western Montana, but it's also part of our culture in a way that it's not just something that we're looking into the rear view mirror into the past. It's something that we're carrying forward into the future. So lest anyone think that history and heritage is simply looking behind you, there's an aspect of it in which it's alive and well today and carrying forward into the future. So speaking of something that is alive and well and carrying forward into the future, that might be the U.S. Forest Service, but it also has a rich history and heritage. So we are delighted to have with us today the Executive Director of the National Museum of Forest Service History, Lisa Tate. And Lisa, would you like to provide an update as far as what you have going on out there? And you have, I think, probably some exciting news about your long awaited for facility that's finally on the horizon here. Oh, you're muted, Lisa. Now
How's that?
you're back with us. Excellent.
Okay, I think I hit a button on my headset by accident. Sorry, everybody. I just have a quick PowerPoint to share if I can share my screen.
Yes.
Just a minute here and I can give you access.
Thanks. I just have a few slides on a PowerPoint, and then I have a fly-through that I can share with you.
All right, you should have access if you see that little box with the arrow at the top of your screen.
Yes.
Should be able to share.
So I've clicked that, and now can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet.
You may have to select a specific window.
So let me. So I'm having some difficulty here in clicking on the button that says share screen. Oh, I see what's happening. Okay. There we go. How's that? Can everybody see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to show a quick PowerPoint that will help you kind of get oriented to our fly through. You know, the National Museum of Forest Service History is a nonprofit organization. And while we work very closely with the Forest Service, we are not the Forest Service and we do not receive funding from the Forest Service. So this has been a project that has been a long time in coming. We, as a nonprofit organization, have been engaged in a capital campaign of about $10.5 million to create a new facility here in Missoula, and we're almost finished with that campaign. So this gives you kind of an idea, this campus master plan, of the overall site that we are developing. We have about 31 acres west, about 1 mile west of the Missoula Airport on Highway 10. I don't know if you can see my cursor. Right here is Highway 10. And we currently have some amenities on this campus. We have a visitor center and an interpretive trail and a beautiful uh, uh, amphitheater and stage. And we have been working for quite some time to raise the money to build the National Conservation Legacy Center, which is this building that you see in the center of the campus. So you enter the campus through Highway 10 West. And again, we have a series of trails currently in place, and we'll be building some future amenities, including a live animal mule barn with a mule ride opportunity for the public, a Smoky Bear playhouse and a Woodsy Owl treehouse, a P2V aerial tanker that we're getting from Neptune Aviation next year, and then, of course, the Conservation Legacy Center, which will serve as the anchor for the campus. And the runway for the Missoula International Airport is just off of this site plan. So we'll have beautiful unobstructed views. So our project is about 12 years old, and in 2008, our organization, which is about 30 years old, decided to raise money to build a facility. And a design was done at that time with the anticipation that a federal appropriation would assist in the funding of this project, and that appropriation never came. So as we continued to work with our donors to finalize our capital campaign, we started getting a lot of traction about 2 years ago. And at that time, we thought we wanted to revise our design and take another look at it, because the original design did not have really a wow factor, but it also didn't incorporate the many innovative wood products that are currently available to help sequester carbon, including cross-laminated timber. And so we really wanted to embrace this new technology and look at developing a very environmentally friendly and clean building. So we started working with a renowned mass timber architect named Tom Chung to design a new facility. And this is one of the early renderings of our facility. And at the end of this presentation, I have a really short fly through of the building. This is a cross section of the lobby that will just give you some examples of the various innovative wood products that we'll be using. This is just a small sampling. And then in addition to working on the new building design, we've also been working with a company, excuse me, called Art Processors. And these are a world leader in creating dynamic, immersive, and participatory exhibitions for museums. And this is a big story with many, many facets when you start talking about the conservation history of the United States. And we knew we would need to use technology to really be able to tell a story that all audiences can learn from, appreciate, and enjoy. And so we simultaneously have been working with Art Processors, and we are just about finished with our conceptual study of the exhibition work. So here you just see a few renderings of this exhibition that we'll be featuring. And then in about a week, we'll actually have a fly through of the whole exhibition hall. So as I mentioned, we're about 85% of the way to our goal. Our anticipated timeline is to start or finish the schematic design and develop the construction documents into next year, complete our capital campaign and prepare for construction in 2022, and then start construction in spring of 2023. If we can get those construction documents developed earlier, then we will start construction in 2022. So that's, I'm going to stop sharing this screen, because that is kind of the overview of our project. And now I'd like to share another screen that will allow us to have a quick fly through. Let me just load it here. It takes just a second for me to kind of get it up and going. Okay. So can you all see now see my screen?
Yep, we can.
What? Okay, great. So this is not a narrated video, so I'll just go ahead and narrate. So here we are coming into the campus from Highway 10 West. And again, some of these features are already here and some of them will be features for the future. By the way, we're open Memorial Day through Labor Day right now, 10 to 4 every day of the week, and we will be open year round once the Conservation Legacy Center is completed. So here we're driving up to the Conservation Legacy Center. We have an orientation plaza, which will be used for drop-offs of individuals or schools or large groups, a place for people to gather. And then driving down to our parking lot. Right in front of us here to the south is the end of the Missoula International Airport. So one of the things we really wanted our building to do was to grab attention. So it's a very dynamic design, has a strong wow factor that can be easily seen from the airport runway or from the interstate. And our target demographic for our audience is actually quite wide. Tourists as well as individuals that have a strong knowledge of conservation history in the United States. So we have two entrances to our lobby. And here we are coming into the south entrance. Now these tree-like columns that you'll see that are supporting the cross-laminated timber roof are quite unique. Each species, there will be different species of trees used for each one of these tree-like columns, and they will be harvested from national forests across the United States. And we'll be using heavy timber framing joinery for the constructions of these support-like tree structures. Right in front of us, we just saw an example of the exhibition hall. Now there's nothing in it right now because this is a fly-through that was done by our architectural firm. And as I mentioned, we'll be having another fly-through of the exhibition area, which is amazing, here in about a week. So this is the south-facing interior corridor. Now we're looking right into the area where some storage will be, as well as the public restrooms. Walking further down the south interior hall, you'll see a small gift shop. The exhibition hall is on the other side of this gift shop, so you'll exit through the gift shop. We have two classrooms that can be made into one large room that can be used for our educational programming. It can be used for meetings and events. And then our current facilities for our repository and our offices are in Midtown Missoula. And those will all be moved to the Conservation Legacy Center and our new campus. So here you kind of saw the back of the house, our offices, and then an exterior patio. Again, directly in front of us, we'll have a large grassy area, and then the Missoula runway, the end of the International Airport runway is just to the south. Now we have an exterior corridor where again, you can see some of these beautiful tree-like columns that are the support structures for the cross-laminated timber roof. We're walking around to the east side of the building where the orientation plaza will be located. We'll be going in through the east side door, and then we'll be going down into our repository space where we'll house our collection of artifacts, photographs, and archival documents. The circular feature that you see is the admissions and informations desk. Again, our exhibition hall, which will be about 7,000 to 8,000 square feet, will be directly, the room directly in front of us. Going down into the elevator into the basement, which I hesitate to call it a basement because it has very high ceilings, will also feature cross-laminated timber walls. So it will have a really nice feel in the basement. And all of these different rooms that you're seeing will have different environmental controls for the various needs of our collection. We'll also have an exhibit fabrication facility down in this area. We'll have a little bit of staff parking and access for large trucks to be able to come in and offload artifacts or take exhibition pieces up to the main floor. And now we'll be going back up into the elevator to a mezzanine level, which is actually some found space that we realized we could develop. This is right above the gift shop and the meeting rooms, the downstairs restrooms. So we'll be finishing this space. We haven't identified a use for it yet. It could be staff space, library space, meeting space, etc. And then the elevator will take you to a roof deck where we'll have a beautiful observation platform to oversee the campus, and also a lookout exhibit. We currently have a lookout replica of an L4 historic lookout on our campus that's fully furnished, but we want to be able to have an exhibit that is ADA accessible. And so this lookout will have full, of course, accessibility. And then we'll just kind of do a quick zoom out so that you can see the an aerial view of the overall facility. There you'll see we'll also have a driveway to be able to bring exhibitions up into the main exhibition hall. And then directly in front of us here in this graphic to the east is the Smokejumper Center and the Technology and Development Center. So we've made a lot of progress in the last couple of years. There was a time when people used to say, if this project ever happened, and now it's just when. And we're really excited to be able to bring this to Missoula. This will be a world-class facility right in our backyard.
Thank you, Lisa. That is also just tremendous news. And Missoula is going to be hosting a couple of regional and world-class facilities here between what's happening at the fairgrounds, what will be on your campus. Are there any questions for Lisa or comments? I remember sitting in some of your board meetings over a decade ago, Lisa, wondering to myself also, will this ever come to fruition? And you've brought us to this point. Thompson.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, for the presentation. Thank you, Dave. I just wanted to encourage you to contact us at the Culture Committee. I think we'd be pretty interested to offer some feedback for you if you think it would be useful.
Terrific, thank you.
Sure.
Other comments or questions for Lisa? Great. All right, thanks, Lisa. Keep up the good work. If there's any way in which Missoula County can help get the word out about your good work and the upcoming exciting events at your facility, let us know.
Thank you.
So when it comes to Missoula County government, we are not only a convener of meetings like this, but we actually are also the owner of historic resources. And one of which is the little known gem that I think we have, and that is the Lalonde Ranch. When I describe this to some folks, they either have never heard of it before, might vaguely recall the cool looking historic buildings off the interstate out there by Big Sky Brewing and Harley Davidson. And even if they recognize the site, they don't realize that Missoula County owns it. So we have our very own Chet Krauser, who oversees our community and planning services office here, to share a little bit about what is going on at Lalonde. Chet.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I'm going to pull up a quick PowerPoint here, mostly to show you some photos. And while I'm doing that, I will say that I'm embarrassed to say I was one of those people who did drive by the interstate looking down and wondering what that brick building was, because it just didn't fit the rest of the development park. And lo and behold, as things should have it, I got to learn a little bit more about that, and now I'm immersed in some efforts there. So it's been kind of a fun journey. Let's see, I'm gonna pull this up. And see. share my screen here. Try one thing. All right, is that coming up for you, hopefully?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I thought I would just visit with you a little bit today about the Lalonde Ranch, a little bit of its history, although I won't go into a ton of detail here today. Hopefully give you a chance to do some exploring on your own here in the future, and then also give you a little bit of an update into the efforts that we've had underway, some of the milestones and achievements that I think we've had here recently, and the approach we've been taking, and then hopefully some ideas of where we think we're headed in the future. So on this first slide, you can see the street view. So if you're driving out kind of on some of the roads there behind Big Sky Brewing Company, that'll give you a sense of where we're at. And I've got a location map here in a second that'll help point out more specifically where this is at. But you can see the brick house there to the left. You can see the log cabin, the proving cabin. There's some other buildings that are behind the trees there. And then, of course, you can see the Interstate 90 and the truck there in the background. So this is kind of a neat site that's sandwiched in amongst a lot of infrastructure and much more modern looking development. As Dave mentioned, this is a parcel and property owned by Missoula County. And that's how we've kind of dove into this in terms of starting to explore how to work with that site. Again, this is the street view, but with these other maps to give you an idea of roughly where we're looking.
Chat, is there any chance you could toggle on presentation mode just to make this a little bit bigger?
Yeah, sure. There you go. Sorry, Dave. I thought I had it on there. That's good.
Thank you.
So you should be seeing the second slide, which has a map there and an aerial image.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So here you've got, again, that street view. This is a little hard to see, so I do apologize for that, but this is a Google map of the Missoula area here in the center. You can kind of see Missoula with Interstate 90, headed Brooks and Reserve Street. Up here in the corner, up near the airport, is the location of Lalonde, and this is the aerial view of the property. If you're looking down, this would be the gas station and convenience store. Over off screen here would be the Harley-Davidson Big Sky Brewing Company. And if you follow the cursor here, this is roughly the outline of the county property, and you can see the buildings here that are part of the Lalonde Ranch property. So a little bit of history here with at least the agricultural history of this particular property, since the buildings that exist on site currently are really remnants of that original settlement and agriculture. Certainly we recognize that there have been folks who have been here in this place and value this place since time immemorial, and that is also a part of our work in trying to understand and tell the stories of this place and the cultures and histories that hold value there. So we continue to work with the Culture Committee on making sure that we get the right stories and find the right ways to tell them, and have their assistance in this particular site. But at least for the buildings that are here, and a little bit of the direct connection to them, the Lalonde family, and you can see the photo there. Adam Lalonde is there on the left with the beard, and over to the right there, on the other side of the young girl in the middle, is his wife, Lucy. And every time we look at this photo, somebody makes a joke about the look that she's giving him, and I'm not sure exactly what might read into that. But it turns out that actually later in life, Lucy was ill and ended up with a hole in her cheek and was blind in one eye. And probably that's the reason that she's looking to the side like that, because she actually had that impact from an earlier illness. But you can see the Lalonde family here. Adam Lalonde came from Canada. He was originally born in Montreal. And he found his way to Montana, working various steamboat jobs up the Mississippi River, finally finding his way to Fort Benton, and then doing overland hauling, and eventually landed in the western part of Montana through all of the excitement surrounding the gold rush and gold opportunities. When he got to this part of Montana, he also realized, as many did, that he should diversify a little bit of his future by looking into some agricultural opportunities. And so he did that in addition to filing a claim for looking for gold. So in this location, the family history is that he purchased the property from the railroad and most likely started on this proving cabin that I'll show you a photo of here in a second. And then as he was working on that, which wasn't uncommon, worked on this house, the brick house that you see photos of as well. We jump to the next slide for you really quick. So here's an image of that proving cabin. And there is some thought that this could be the oldest standing structure in its original location in all of Missoula County. So there is really some significance out there. And this, interestingly enough, even though so much has been developed around it, is really one of those only remnants of that historic agriculture in Missoula Valley. So this is truly one of the better opportunities that we have to preserve and tell the story of this part of the Missoula Valley history. Let's see. So we're not entirely sure exactly when the construction of the main house occurred, but we do think that 1870s is probably a ballpark on the proving cabin, just to give you a sense of the time frame that we're talking about here. And just flip through some notes and make sure I get some of the details on this history correct. So they continued to live on the ranch and operate the ranch. Adam was really active in politics and active in community. They raised their family there. They each had, of course, their own colorful history in life. And one of the kind of interesting stories about Lucy, in addition to the illness that she had, was that her family initially, she was from Pennsylvania, had made their way via wagon to Utah, and she was on that wagon ride with Brigham Young. And so one of her favorite claims to fame was telling the folks she met that she got to shake the hand of Brigham Young. So it's always kind of interesting, the little tidbits that you'll find in some of this information. So as I said, they continued to work the ranch there. Eventually, Adam passed away through health complications in 1918. He was 78 years old. Lucy lived a few more years. She eventually passed away in 1926, and she was 71. At that point in time, the family continued to operate the ranch, but it transitioned through mostly those daughters that were part of their family. And eventually in 1944, the Kyle family, Henry Kyle, purchased the property from the Lalonde daughters and quickly realized that he wasn't going to be able to keep up with the ranch and the farming that occurred there. And so he ended up convincing his daughter, who was Liviane Gooden, and her husband to move in and start the ranching. And so that kind of started the next phase of activity there. And I've just got some fun historic photos. And these photos and this information is all compiled in a historic overview that was put together by Alan Matthews and Steve Adler back in 2017. And we've got some of these documents too. If you'd like to ever have a look at them, feel free to let us know, and we'd be happy to share a link or get you a copy. But here you can see Alvin Gooden at the Lalonde Ranch with some cattle in 1955. This gives you a sense of what some of the corrals looked like in the 1950s there. And then it was kind of an interesting feature. Liviane had these peacocks that were kind of this popular and kind of attraction, I guess, for the site. So you find these photos of peacocks. The one at the top there is a little bit difficult to see because of the shadows, but then apparently peacocks like drinking out of the hose like I used to when I was a kid. So that's kind of a neat photo. So here is that main brick house that we've talked about, to give you a sense of kind of what that looks like. And I'll transition now to give you a sense of where we've been recently and what some of those milestones have been and where we're headed. So we have had many conversations about Lalonde, and they took place BC. That's before Chet. That's my bad joke for the day. Dave could probably tell you those stories, but Lalonde and what to do with Lalonde has long been a conversation with lots of different ideas about it, including historic preservation. I came on board in my position in 2018, and so one of the first conversations actually I had, I think, with Dave was talking about Lalonde, and maybe even before I started, I think, an invite to go out and see the property. So this has been one of those things that we've continued to work on slowly but surely. As I was coming on in those conversations, I was getting pulled into those conversations. I remember Dave, and he may have already done this, and I kind of merged in as I was getting on board, but there was a convening of a group of, I'll call historic preservation stakeholders throughout the community that had gathered to discuss, how do we look for some of these preservation opportunities? And at that time, it was kind of feeling like a little bit of an uphill battle in terms of making the case for historic preservation there. But we turned the corner, and eventually those group efforts and conversations turned into bringing on a facilitator with Ginny Tribe, and then forming a small committee, largely of some staff and some other folks that were associated with the project, and then also some community focused groups to just get a little bit more information on how we could move forward with the Lalonde project and give us some insights as to what folks thought and what sorts of opportunities we might want to consider as first steps. I think one of the, out of that, I guess, came the establishment of a strategic framework. And that really outlined a mission, a vision, and some guiding principles. And I'll post a link of that in the chat here when I'm done with the presentation so that you can have a look at it. And if I can get the right window open on my computer. Oops. I can just really quickly read you the mission statement to give you a sense of what that sounds like. And that is, Lalonde Ranch preserves Missoula County's history, where heritage, culture, and sense of place are celebrated for the purpose of education and reflection on our connection to the past. Its location serves as a gateway to Missoula Valley history and helps tell the story of the area, including its thousands of years as part of the homeland of the Salish and Kalispel people, and its remarkable place in the valley's rich agricultural history over the past century. And then there are probably about 10 or so guiding principles, and then the vision, which I'll also read to you, and I'll let you explore the guiding principles, but is that the Lalonde Ranch is a safe, accessible public place with basic infrastructure for self-guided experiences through signage and educational materials. A strategic plan, sustainable funding, and a functional organizational structure guide site development and management. The public enjoys compatible uses at the site, as well as historic and cultural hands-on educational experiences. So hopefully between the mission and vision there, and again, feel free to have a look at the guiding principles, but that'll give you a sense of maybe where we're headed. Then this led to a conversation, a more formal conversation with the Board of County Commissioners. And in October of 2020, the commission passed a resolution for the site. And the resolution is largely, it's actually a really great kind of bulleted list of some of the history of Lalonde and some of the rationale for why taking a historic preservation approach here is really important. But essentially what the resolution did was it not only adopted the strategic framework formally by the commission, but it also committed to the long-term stewardship of the site. It designated Community and Planning Services as the sort of coordinating entity to bring folks together and work on how to move that site forward in terms of both the preservation aspect of it, but also the long-term sustainability, and trying to look at programmatically how to incorporate that into county government and have it be a county function, and eventually hopefully get that open to the public. So I'll post that as well in the chat, so you have a chance to look at that if you're interested. It also outlines a few of the historic documents that have been compiled over the years. There's really been a lot of effort to document and also evaluate the site. So we do have quite a bit to work with, which is good news. Post the resolution, here we go, sorry about that. Post resolution, we've actually continued on with some of those conversations. So we now have what we refer to as a strategic work group, and that's comprised of Commissioner Strohmeyer. We also have Jim McDonald and Paul Filicetti, Elizabeth Johnson from the city, I'm a part of that. Jason Howitzer, our facilities manager with or director with the county, Matt Lotzenheiser, Juniper Davis with our Parks, Trails, and Open Lands program, and also Nancy Rattel with our Grants and Community Programs division here in CAPS, all working together to kind of move some of this forward. We've had wonderful assistance with Ginny Tribe, and kind of a neat addition to that group over the course of the last about a year, not quite a year, was Rachel Foe, who was actually a Bacchus Fellow at the University of Montana's Masters of Public Education program. And so she came on board to help us out, and unfortunately has decided to leave, even though she was helping volunteer post that assistantship that she had with us. But she's moving on to some other things. But it's really been an awesome opportunity to network with other folks in the community. That work now has led to some advanced planning and some site stewardship effort conversations. And in the bullets there, you can see we're going to continue to move forward in pursuing historic register nomination. And we've just worked with the city. I think we're going to have a collaborative effort there to move that forward. We continue to look at exploration of potential partners and uses. And so one of the questions we've asked is whether or not we could have an active presence there through a partner even in the house, and explored ideas as to whether it could even serve as office space, as a kind of a welcome center or visitor center for the public, those sorts of things, trying to explore where we might find some opportunities there. And then moving forward with the development of a master plan outline. And right now we're looking at developing a scope that we might be able to put out to some consultants to see if they can help us move forward on actually getting that document laid out and give us some guidance here into the near future. So I would say stay tuned for more information and exciting work ahead. It's been, I think, a little bit of an effort in terms of not necessarily having a whole lot of inertia behind it, other than the great motivation of the folks who've been willing to volunteer and lend their time and effort. But I'd say we've been making some great strides, and I expect we'll continue to do so. I was visiting with Dave yesterday and said, I feel like we're almost to that point where things aren't going to backslide, which is kind of a nice feeling, although we really have some important work to do. And I think we've got some ideas of how to get there. So it's been really fun. And I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about what we've been doing. And then I've just got some really neat photos of the site that a photographer had taken. And I just think it brings out some of the more kind of intimate character of the site. So I'll just run through these really quick. Just kind of some neat perspective there that certainly you're not going to get from the interstate. And with that, if there's any questions, happy to answer them. And Dave, by all means, if there's something you'd like to add or something I may have missed, feel free to add to the conversation here.
Thanks so much, Chad. And as part of the list of interesting tidbits that you sometimes come upon, I got a call out of the blue a couple of years ago from someone who actually lived in that brick house back in the 1950s, and he informed me that at one point in time they raised turkeys in one of the upstairs bedrooms. So anyway, I'm sure there's an opportunity for interpretation along with that and many other elements, but pretty exciting project, and we've come a long ways. Any questions or comments from folks?
This is Tony. I'd just like to say thank you, Chet. I've driven by there millions of times, it seems like, and I always wondered what that building was. And now I know. Thank you. I've always wanted to own that brick building.
Well, Tony, why don't you give me a call? We might be able to work something out.
Yes, and currently the property is lined with no trespassing signs. My goal is to get those down and put up welcome signs to the public. So we're on a good trajectory. Other comments or questions from folks? Okay, let's move on. We've got a lot of interesting stuff here today. So Beartrex Bridge. Place names matter. If you think of the name of a place, a location, think of the signage in downtown Missoula that embodies the names of individuals largely or tree species. What do place names signify? They signify culture, memory, history. But in thinking about the community in which we live, Missoula, Montana, there are precious few visible names of places on signage that would lead you to believe that this place was anything other than something that had always been occupied by settlers or homesteaders, and that spontaneously generated in the mid-19th century, and it did not. There's a deep history to this place that also is something that lives on today and reflects the heritage of the indigenous peoples who have in the past and still call this place home. So in April of this year, how time flies, it was actually earlier this year, still in the middle of the pandemic, the Transportation Commission, the Montana State Transportation Commission, after being requested in lockstep by Missoula County, the city of Missoula, and the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, officially named what otherwise had informally been known as the Higgins Avenue Bridge as Beartrex Bridge. Contrary to what some folks think, there had never been a formal name associated with the bridge. It is the bridge over which Higgins Avenue crosses and still crosses. So we took the step in partnership with the tribes, the city, to ask this of our State Transportation Commission, and they granted the request. And we will be formally dedicating this bridge as Beartrex Bridge, and the new bridge, which will be completed in July of next year. July 16th, actually, of next year is the date that we've arrived on for the formal dedication of the bridge. There's more that could be said there, but I'm delighted to have with us both Tony Incashola and Thompson Smith from the Salish Kalispel Culture Committee, and they will talk to us a little bit more about from whence the name Beartrex originated, and be available to answer any questions that you have. So Tony and Thompson.
Okay, I'll just say a few words here and then I'll let Thompson take over. He's usually needs a couple hours, but so I'll just take a couple minutes here. First of all, thank you for allowing us to be part of your roundtable today. And place names are more than, like Dave said, it just means a lot. You know, it means life, it means people, it means history, it means stories. And through this process, if you study, you look at the names and place names, and they themselves have a whole bundle of information, I guess, in history. That there are most places, either in the Salish Kalispel people's way, most place names are given either through an event, through people, through stories, or through our creation stories, which is also something, an educational way of teaching our children. And so for the Salish and Kalispel people that have lived here for many thousands of years, you know, we spread or we extend. We are the upper Kalispel in this area. The lower Kalispel is in eastern Washington, a small band of people there. And so it just gives you an idea that the stories and the things and the history that come from one simple place name. You know, Missoula, in Missoula, you know, there's a whole story behind a lot of that. But I don't want to take too much time, and I want Tom to explain a little bit how we go through this whole process and how we got to this place. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tom.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Atuan. Thank you, Tony. Hello, everybody. And as Tony said, thank you for giving us a few minutes of your day and the honor of being part of this roundtable. Thank you, Dave, for the invitation. And can I have screen sharing?
You should have that ability, yes.
Okay. Well, I've got a little, as they say, power corrupts and PowerPoint corrupts absolutely. So I've got a few pictures to show you. And I always find Microsoft Teams a little clunky here. So click share tray. Is that on your screen yet or not? I'm afraid not.
Not yet. So if you click the little upward arrow that is adjacent to the red leave button, that will pull up a screen, and then you should be able to click on the button that says window if it's not appearing already, and select which window you want to share.
Okay. It's a Mac, so it may be a little problematic. So it says, when I click on the up thing there, Dave, it says open share tray. And so there is a share tray. But when I click within that, nothing happens.
Kyla, can you throw us a lifeline here?
It should show you your screens that are open when you open that share tray, because that's how it is when we share the content through Teams. But if you want to send me the information, I can share it as well.
Lisa Tate, are you a Mac aficionado?
No, but when I was trying to share my screen, I experienced a similar thing. And what I had to do was raise up my whole screen because it was below my window and I couldn't see it the way that my screen showed at full screen. So I had to minimize my screen and raise it up, and then I could see where to share, which screens to share from. I don't know if that'll help you or not, but that's what happened to me when I was sharing mine.
It might. Let me just try. It might be a problem that I have two monitors as well, but bear with me, everybody. I'm sorry for this little technical delay here.
And if worst comes to worst, Thompson, if you wanted to email it to either me or Kyla.
Tony could predict this to you, but it's way too big to email.
Tony,
Okay.
is there anything else you'd like to share while Thompson's monkeying with his apparatus there?
Well, I can just share a little bit about, the history. To me, is important too, regardless of what culture it is, and like for instance, the brick building and how many questions that I had and that was answered today. But throughout the country, there's just so many things that we have out there as people of this country. How lucky we are that sometimes we don't stop to think about any of that. We take a lot of things for granted, and then all of a sudden it's gone, and then we don't realize what it was and what it is. But all those buildings, place names, or whatever you want to call it, we are all tied to it one way or another. Our histories, our families, I just enjoy listening to other people's stories about their history, about their things, and how we connect as a people together on this continent. And the Salish and the Kalispel people that were in this area for thousands of years, and the stories that are shared by our elders that say that we came from one large group of people, and eventually as everything else, we grew into too large a group that we had to split up and go in a different directions to support and feed our families and raise our families. And so that's how the Northwest, what is now the United States, became homeland for the Salish speaking people. We are the most eastern bands of Salish-speaking people. The rest are all west of here. The Coeur d'Alenes, the Lower Kalispels, the Spokanes, all of those in Idaho, Washington, and parts of Oregon and Washington, and even parts of Canada, the Salish, the Thompson Salish, are all part of what our elders have said was one group of people. And over a period of thousands of years, we spread out to different areas and became who we are today. And the language is still the same, you know, the Salish language, but the dialects have changed over years. You know, the further you get from this place, you go further west, the sound of the Salish language is still the same, but some of the words the dialect has changed a lot. So, and there's, I don't know how many bands of Salish that we have now today that we started out with after we spread bands upon bands. And, you know, besides keeping our people separate for various different reasons, that they all went into the different direction. And that's throughout this whole country where the, you know, place names became our storytellers, are from part of our history. And through these place names, they tell and explain a lot of the different things and how we became who we are and where we're at here today. And it's you know, there's you can go on forever in any culture, in any language about place names and the interesting stories behind them. You know, a simple thing is when the Salish were in the Bitterroot area, we call Florence, the town of Florence. In our language, we call it Chputlus, which means greasy belly. And the simple story there was a blacksmith there. And, you know, the blacksmith had this blacksmith apron that was shiny. It looked oily. And so they called them Chputlus. And so simple as that. And so when somebody says that, they know where Florence is at. So there's a lot of different simple things like that, but then there's others that are stories are a lot more detailed and more intense in some of those place things. So there's a lot of history in the place thing.
Thanks, Tony.
Are you ready yet, Tom?
Thompson, do you just want to talk us through?
Yeah, I'll just have to do a verbal thing, and I can't do that as well as Tony can. I'm sorry, Dave. Microsoft Teams is not cooperating. And Lisa, is there any other tip you can give me? You said you clicked on that up arrow and then did something.
Well, I clicked on the up arrow and then the same thing came up where it said share screen, but it was actually, my screen was shown below my monitor level. So I had to minimize the whole screen, and then I saw my screen and was able to click on it. But my monitor wasn't allowing me to see where I had to click when it was in full screen mode.
No, I've exited, I've tried that. So it's for some reason not working with mine. So I apologize to everybody. Sorry, Dave.
Nope, that's okay.
Prepare this thing. So I guess, the story with Beartrex Bridge really is a great story. And I know that Tony and the elders and tribal council have been so appreciative to the county commissioners and the Missoula City Council for welcoming the culture committee and the tribal council's suggestions or suggestion, as it turned out, for the new bridge name. And Beartrex is a name that really goes to the heart of tribal history as the elders have told it to us over the years. And I want to emphasize that I'm really just doing my best here to forward on to you, to share with you some of what's been shared with me by the people who really are the experts in this stuff, who are the tribal elders. And in a true sense, the culture committee's mission is to bring the elders' voices back to the fore as the primary authorities on tribal history, culture, and language. And so everything we kick out really has that at its heart. And the elders convened about this, and the discussion went along for quite a while before this name really came to the fore. And it's really, I really do wish we could share with you the PowerPoint, because it, you know, a picture's worth 1,000 words. But you know, darn Bill Gates. I've been cussing out Microsoft Teams all year. Every
We'll
time
do it, Thompson. We'll do an encore performance at some point, maybe around the time of the dedication, and we'll have a second bite at the apple.
Yeah, great. Well, we can make sure it's Zoom then. But as Tony says, many of the place names that surround the Missoula area, that surround Lalonde Ranch, that surround the site of the Forest Service History Center, that surround the whole valley, are really what the elders consider the oldest names, place names in tribal tradition, which are the names that are rooted in the creation stories. So just to the north of the areas we've been discussing today is Sinpo, or Sinpokum, which means place where you come out. And since there's only a scattering of snow, but it is December, so I think I can explain that that's from a creation story centered in the Jocko Valley. And the base of Evero Hill is really the anus of the monster. And it's where some of the animals, especially the smaller ones in the world today, came out into the world. And in the process of surviving this killing monster, with the coyotes saving them from death and destruction, they were also transformed into the beings we know today. And so, you know, just to the south of these places, across the Clark Fork, is another one called Amtkane that's rooted in the creation stories. One could consider the kind of the southernmost reach of the valley down around Lolo, Tumsimpli, No Salmon, which is a site from a creation story. So all around are these places that talk about, as Dave was saying, so many aspects of culture and history that are held in place names, so many aspects of cultural power of really who is shaping and ordering the land, what culture, what way of life. And these names testify to the length of tribal tenure here, that in tribal consciousness, the relationship with this place reaches back to the time that the land became what we know of it, how we know it today. Basically, many of these stories refer back to the events of the last ice age and the warming of the climate. And for those for whom this may raise a quizzical eyebrow or two, it's worth noting that the oldest archaeological sites of human remains that are publicly known, this is not revealing anything secret, are reach back to that very time. The Anzac site along what's called, in fact, Flathead Creek, a tributary of the Shields River, is dated now to about 12,800 years ago. So just after the last draining of Glacial Lake Missoula. And, you know, there are stories about the emergence of the climate regime we know today. So many of these place names that are on the maps that we've, with the support, the wonderful support of Missoula County, we now have up in a number of locations that mark the place names of Missoula County. Many of these names refer back to these creation stories or to the resources that were abundant in these places that were critical in the traditional way of life. And so the names also reflect the relationship, the cultural relationship between the people and the land, the plants, the animals, the waters, and the land itself. And we have one of these signs. The first iteration of it is up in Fort Missoula Regional Park. Another version of it is up on the wall of the renamed Sophie Moise Public Hearing Room in the Missoula County Courthouse. Another wonderful gesture from the county commissioners, more than a gesture, that really is helping restore these relationships of respect between the county and the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. And so Beartrex, let me jump right to that. The first person that we know who bore this name was a sub-chief who served in the late 18th and early 19th centuries. He served under a head chief named Kutit, which means gyrfalcon. And he died in a story I won't go into the details of, right at the end of the 18th century. The chief died in that incident in which Beartrex showed tremendous courage. And he was still serving as head chief under the next chief, Three Eagles, Chetskei, who was the head chief of the Salish when Lewis and Clark arrived in 1805. And so when we look at one of the true masterpieces of Montana art, the mural by Charlie Russell that hangs in the legislative chambers in the Montana Capitol, and we see that what's really a wonderfully subversive work of art, because here Russell was engaged to do a mural depicting Lewis and Clark, and I'm sure what the legislators imagined was that Lewis and Clark would be front and center, and in fact it's the Salish horsemen who are front and center. And Lewis and Clark, you wouldn't even notice they're in that painting if you didn't know it was about them. They're kind of blurry, haggling figures in the background. But one can realize in thinking about this, that in that group of Salish people in that painting was the first Beartrex and the head chief, Three Eagles. So his son was a man who was born about 1790, and who lived into the 1880s. I now think probably the late 1880s, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But he of course was in his 50s when the Jesuit missionaries arrived, beginning with Pierre Jean de Smet establishing St. Mary's Mission in the Bitterroot Valley in 1841 at the ancient place name of the Salish people, Ketmish, Wide Cottonwoods, today known as the Stevensville area. And they established the mission there. And so this second Beartrex acquired a Christian name of Alexander Beartrex. And he is arguably the person we know more about from that period of the 19th century than any other historical figure in Salish life. He was a renowned medicine man and warrior. Gustavus Sohan painted a portrait of him when he was a sub-chief at the signing of the Hellgate Treaty, the negotiations for the Hellgate Treaty in July 1855. And he said, "Judgment and decision is written in every line of his face." And you can really feel it looking at the portraits of Alexander Beartrex and realizing his tremendous leadership within the tribe, helping the Salish people chart a course through a period of tremendous challenge. And as I say, he was a signer of the Hellgate Treaty under Chief Victor, Huetzin, many horses, whose Christian name was Chief Victor. And you can, there's an X mark by his written name in the original treaty records that if you're interested, you can look up on the wonderful websites put together by the University of Wisconsin, where you can see the original field copies of treaties. And he was also serving throughout this time in one of the critical roles of sub-chiefs, which is as a support, as an advisor to the head chief, Chief Victor. And this is a time when it's really difficult to continue to keep unity within the people, as all kinds of challenges are mounting on every side. And in spite of the various pressures that are mounting, one of the things that every historian of the Hellgate Treaty realizes is the steadfastness of Chief Victor through those negotiations. That as Isaac Stevens tried every which way to levy pressure upon the tribes to agree to bunch together onto a single reservation, Chief Victor just kind of implacably refused to leave the Bitterroot Valley. And Chief Alexander of the upper Kalispell, as Tony was explaining to you earlier about the tribes, or also known as the Pend Oreille, he refused to leave the Jocko Mission Valley area. And this is reflected also in the original treaty documents from the Hellgate Treaty, where finally, on the last day of the negotiations, Isaac Stevens was compelled by the resistance of Chief Victor and the Salish, including Alexander Beartrex, to add a clause to the Hellgate Treaty designating the Bitterroot Valley from Lolo Creek south as a reservation for the Salish people. And that then initiated a 36-year-long struggle over the Bitterroot Valley and the fate of the Salish nation. But for the Salish people, their impression, especially after nothing was done for the next 15 years, was that that was going to permanently be their reservation, their guaranteed homeland. And the terms of the treaty were such that there was supposed to be no non-Indian settlement south of Lolo Creek until things were resolved. Alexander Beartrex was also, it should be noted, a signatory of the so-called Lame Bull or Judith River Treaty in October of 1855, which Stevens was also a part of, and which basically divvied up the buffalo hunting grounds east of the Continental Divide among different tribal nations. The sub-agenda of that, which was not revealed to the tribes, was to basically free up those areas to the development of non-Indian commerce, which could not really develop as long as the area remained kind of a war zone between tribal nations. So this was Alexander Beartrex that I'm speaking of, and his daughter came to be known as Mary Beartrex. And she, sometime in this time period of probably the 1840s, 1850s, we actually don't know the exact date, married someone who was called in Salish Irkut Simche, and that means far away grizzly. And his Christian name was Louis Vanderburgh. And he was born in 1817. He died in 1923 at the age of 106. And he, like his father-in-law and like his grandfather-in-law, served as an honored sub-chief, as the first sub-chief, the kind of second in command under Chief Charlo, the renowned Salish leader who was the son of Chief Victor and who served as the leader of the Salish people throughout that tumultuous period of the second half of the 19th century. And so he's, just as Alexander Beartrex had stood by Victor at the Hellgate Treaty in this longtime Salish strategy of always refusing, never going to war against non-Indians, but also always firmly insisting upon the rights and continued sovereignty of the Salish nation. And that was really guided Victor's vision throughout the Hellgate Treaty, and it guided Chief Charlo's vision throughout his leadership in the second half of the 19th century. And he refused over and over again to abandon the Bitterroot Valley, the cherished homeland of the Salish people, where he said, the bones of our forefathers are buried. And the problem was, from the very start of his chieftainship, the pressure was amped up because settlers who had long coveted the Bitterroot Valley as one of the most kind of attractive agricultural and settlement areas in western Montana, thought there was an opening with the death of Chief Victor, who was widely respected in the area, and the assumption to the chieftainship of his son, Chief Charlo, who was less experienced, of course. And so they put pressure up the chain and pressured President Grant to declare in 1871 that a survey had been conducted, which it really hadn't been. And it had, lo and behold, determined that the Jocko or Flathead Reservation was better suited to the Salish people than was the Bitterroot, and therefore the Salish should be removed. And Congress then sent future President James Garfield, then a member of the minority in Congress, the Republicans, from Ohio, west to the Bitterroot Valley to quote unquote negotiate the removal of the Salish. And this was the famous forgery in Montana's history of that time period, where Charlotte refused to sign in spite of threats of bloodshed. And the original field copy of the Garfield Agreement to this day exists and shows no X mark by Charlot's name. But Garfield wrote to his superiors and to other officials in the aftermath of those meetings and said we should proceed as if Charlot had signed. And so the copy of the agreement that was sent to the Senate for ratification in 1872 had an X mark beside Charlot's name. And so the pressure only increased, although the Salish still, the majority of them refused to leave. A few families did move. During the same period of time, the buffalo were decimated. And this was one of Beartrex' great contributions to Salish life. He was able, as a medicine person, to see where the herds were, to see where enemy tribes were. And his powers were such that it was said that when enemy tribes could hear his drum and his singing as they snuck towards a Salish encampment, they would abandon their attack because they realized he could already see them where they were and they had no chance. So yet one thing that Beartrex could not do was to help as the buffalo were systematically wiped out. So there really were no buffalo to see. And that really, the tipping point for that, the coup de grace, I guess, was the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad in 1883. And that then ramped up the pressure on the Salish, the majority of whom still remained in the Bitterroot Valley. And so finally, in 1889, Chief Charlot signed the agreement to leave. And it wasn't until 2 years later, a whole nother sordid story in this history, that the Salish were forced on what became known as Montana's Trail of Tears, forced to leave the Bitterroot and march north to the Flathead Reservation. And the Salish contingent were divided into 3 groups under the direction of at the direction of Chief Charlot, one of which was led by his second in command, Louis Vanderburgh, Irkut Simche. And because Louis Vanderburgh was married to Mary Beartrex, I should have explained earlier, the Vanderburgh family as a whole, and their many descendants still today, are also known in the community as the Beartrex family. So Louis Vanderburgh led Mary Beartrex and a large contingent of the Salish across the Clark Fork River at or next to the Higgins Bridge. And I say at or next to because at the time in 1891, October 1891, that bridge was actually in the process of being rebuilt because it had washed out yet again. Several of the bridges washed out in floods, and it wasn't completed until the next year. So at that time, it was a very rickety, sparse structure that could only be crossed by, individually, kind of making your way across it. So the sense of the elders is that the majority, if not all, of the contingent with Louis Vanderburgh, the Mary Beartrex and the others, crossed by fording the river, something the Salish were renowned at doing in the annals of the 19th century. From the fur traders to the Jesuits to the Stevens Party, all remarked in wonder at the facility and skill of the Salish people in fording large rivers. So as I say, Louis Vanderburgh, the son-in-law of Alexander Beartrex, lived to the age of 106, dying in 1923. And the Vanderburghs, from that time to this day, have continued to serve as sub-chiefs Victor Vanderburgh, and then Jerome and Agnes Vanderburgh. Jerome was Victor's son, who were great cultural leaders within tribal life. And then the members of the Elders Advisory Council of recent years, such as Agnes Vanderburgh and Lucy Vanderburgh, a member of the elders today, and Joe Vanderburgh, who just died a couple years ago, all of whom also modeled that kind of aspect of the Beartrex family and of Salish kind of strategy and relationship with the United States in another way, which is they served in the military. Agnes Vanderburgh, who just died a couple years ago, well into his 90s, was a paratrooper in World War II. And Joe Vanderburgh, who just died, I guess is it going to be 2 years? Maybe 1 year. But Joe served with distinction in the military as well. And so this family is to this day such a vital part of the Salish community. And the elders, as they were discussing, wrestling with different names that could be good names for that, including the place name for the city of Missoula, in Tate, place of little bull trout. But as soon as this name Beartrex came up, they all came together realizing that was the right name. And so it went to the tribal council, it went to the county commissioners, it went to the Missoula City Council, and then it went to the Montana Highway Commission. And I think Tony and the elders are just so pleased that at every stage it's been received so positively. So I think next July will be a fantastic day, another day to really remember this history more deeply, and to also keep building these relations of respect between the tribes and the Missoula community of today. So I'll stop right there. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Thompson. That's a fantastic overview. I do want to definitely be serious with the offer that we will invite you back, and we'll work on the technology in advance and or use a different, more reliable platform than Microsoft Teams, because you do have some pretty striking images that I think the folks here would love to see. We have exhausted a full hour and a half, so we're going to have to unfortunately kick the COVID-19 documentation project until our next gathering. And we also, at some point, I would love to have a lightning round of little overviews of what everyone on the line is up to, but I want to be respectful of folks' time, so we're probably not going to be able to do that today either. Any quick questions or comments for Thompson or Tony before we need to break? Well, I hope folks have found this useful and interesting. As you can see, there is a ton going on in Missoula County relative to heritage and history. The COVID-19 documentation project, and Matt Lotzenheiser or Leif Fredrickson, are you out there? I'll give you 30 seconds to 1 minute to give us a teaser if you would like.
Leif, I'm here, but if you want to do the teaser, or I can do it, whichever one's fine.
I plead for a teaser because I hate the idea of us bumping Matt.
No problem.
Leif or Matt? Yeah, either way, I can go. So we've when the COVID pandemic first sort of broke out, a number of organizations, the county and University of Montana, the Historical Museum, a bunch of other organizations kind of got together to start thinking about how we might document what was already clearly going to be a very significant historical event. And so we sort of informally and without funding did some collection and tracking of what people were collecting for a while. And then Missoula County, with Dave Strohmeyer spearheading it, got a grant, a CARES grant, to fund a project to archive documents from local organizations and to conduct oral history interviews. And basically what we want to create is a community archive that will be something where both the public and researchers can get a sense of how the Missoula area experienced this COVID pandemic, and how, what the responses were to it. So it's both sort of a documentation of like what it was like, and also potentially, an archive that can be used to analyze what happened and perhaps apply it to future scenarios.
Well, thanks, Leif. That we're going to have to leave it at that. Hopefully, that was a sufficient enough enticement to come back at our next roundtable, and we'll dive into this project a little bit more, not only in terms of the genesis of the project, but also in terms of some of the ongoing work that will really be gaining momentum over the next number of months before we gather again. There's enough going on that I'm thinking that maybe rather than just an annual event twice a year might be a better opportunity to not only have some in-depth conversation about the fantastic projects going on out there, but also a little more opportunity for interchange so that we can cross-pollinate. Any last thoughts before we need to split today? Well, thanks so much. We will work on scheduling something later in the spring, if that's okay with you, maybe in the run up to our July dedication of Beartrex Bridge, of which I think there could be a role for many folks on the line here today to help with that event.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, everyone. Happy holidays.